Hello friends, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. I am going to turn you around right now, and I am working on a wedding portrait. As you know, I do most of my wedding paintings on location, but this is a nice case where I've been hired to do a portrait of the wedding couple from a photograph. So I am finished with the acrylic underpainting. Let me zoom in here just for a minute so you can see what this looks like. I know you needed to see that man's belly button. There you go, getting there. Okay, so there are the two faces. And what I'm thinking and saying is that that's close enough for underpainting. Let me grab here we go. So here's the photograph I'm working from, and there's the painting. So it's very, very close. The main thing that is needed in these faces is just subtle, mostly softening. They're a little bit hard, and that's sort of my feeling is that's the nature of acrylics. Acrylics are sort of hard. So the acrylics are done, and now I'm doing oil. In most of my painting, I'm following my typical technique is I do a glaze, oil glaze over the entire canvas, whatever colors I want. Right now I'm using pure oxide red. Especially here at the top portion. Let me raise this up. And by the way, my microphone is being replaced. So again, sorry for the bad quality of my sound. I hope to have that fixed by tomorrow. Now, for the bottom part of the canvas, I'm going to use, so it turns out I'm doing my most typical combination. For some reason, it makes me a little cautious. If you find yourself doing the same thing over and over, you might be in a rut. And so oxide red and ultramarine blue. Definitely my most common go-to colors. So I better examine myself really carefully and make sure I'm not just stuck. I don't think I am. I'm actually going to bring a little bit of oxide red, which is a brown color, by the way, if you're not an artist. Oxide red is not red. It's rust red is what oxide means. Iron oxide, in this case. So it's definitely a brown color. Now, if you're an artist, and if you ever have the occasion to paint a white object, like a white car or a white dress in this case, this technique is frankly fabulous for doing white subject matter. What technique? Doing an acrylic underpainting, getting some of the detail in the acrylics, and then doing a glaze, a very thin transparent glaze in oil on top of that. And then coming in and doing details on top of that. It's a beautiful way to achieve lacy, translucent fabric, whatever that is. I'm not a fabric expert, so whatever fabric that is, this is a great way to achieve it. But same thing when I paint white cars, which are just a virtual playground of highlights and reflections. In other words, when you paint a white car, you don't paint it white. You know that, right? Yeah, so using this technique is just a great way to paint. Same thing for using the same technique is great for things like water reflection, where you don't try to achieve the final color all at once. You let it grow through layers, develop through layers of color. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Now, I have a decision to make. And I honestly don't know which way I'm going with this yet. The question for me is, I'm sorry, I know my sound's not very good. The question is, should I zoom right into the faces? Should I work out the faces first and then go to the rest of the painting? Or should I do the rest of the painting and then end up with the faces? There's not a right or wrong answer to that question. It's a... And I think my answer today is yes, in fact. That is what I'm going to do. For me, I kind of, in this decision, I harken back to one of my old friends, Drew Blair, who I had the privilege of working, doing airbrush sort of with 20 years ago. And he would always do the face first and work out from there, because the face is the hardest thing. And he didn't want to have to, have all this finished and mess up on the face. So he would usually do faces first. Or the principle is do the hardest thing first, which of course is faces. I think I'm going to do the same thing here. In which case, I'm going to look at this photograph. And here's how I'm going to do that. Quite simple. I mentioned this yesterday. 3 steps to finish these faces. 1, mid-tone, medium flesh tone over the whole face, over the whole face. And when I say face, I actually mean all the flesh tone. Medium flesh tone, translucent over the whole thing. And then dark details, and finally light details, or light highlights, one could say. So I'm mixing up a medium flesh tone, and by the way, this laminating, you didn't see what I did you? Here, hang on, so let me point up here. Laminating photographs, here's a good trick. It's a great way to match color. This is laminated, right? It's a cheap inkjet printer off my Hewlett-Packard printer, but I can go like this and say, wow, okay, yep, that's pretty close. Good enough. Wipe that paint off so it doesn't distract me later. And I'm ready to go. I like that. Now let me think. Do I want it slightly redder? Nope, I don't think so. I think a little. Okay. I'm doing. And over the hair, yeah, possibly, probably, yes. Even over the hair. So this is what I mean. Usually, I don't always do over the teeth and the eyes, but at this size, yes, I am. Doing this mid-tone flesh color over her entire face. Then I'm going to follow up after this with dark details, and finally light details. It's the order that I'm giving you that is important. If you try it the other way around, if you try darks first, light second, and mid-tone third, nope. If you try mid-tone first, then light second, and darks last, nope. In fact, I can look often at a student's portrait and tell if they did this step in the wrong order. For instance, if you do, the only way to achieve, let's talk about whoops, I didn't move you back, did I? Sorry about that. Okay, let's talk about let's say a large portrait. Sorry that I messed up there. Let's talk about maybe doing a large portrait. Let's take a classic American Indian, old Indian face, full of creases, full of cracks. The question is, how do you paint those cracks? If you do the dark details last, and you have a little tiny brush like this, and you and you stick out your tongue and you paint dark cracks. Sorry, I can't demonstrate this, but you get the idea. You paint the dark cracks. Last, it'll look horrible. They won't look like cracks. They'll be too fat, too bold, too coarse. So what you do is you do mid-tone over everything, then you do the dark cracks, and then you come back and do the light skin between the cracks, and you skinny up the cracks by doing the light. That's just one for instance as to, so why do you do it in this order? The order is important. And again, every rule can be broken, yes, but you better know the rule first before you presume to break it. And I'm doing the same thing here with the man. Do I want him the same color? Actually, no. I am going to add a tiny bit of red for his overall flesh tone. He has a slightly redder complexion, ever so slight. Now in his case, I'm not going to do all of his hair. His hair is dark enough that it warrants a different underpainting, if you will. So yeah, I consider all of it, even though I'm in oils now, I consider all of this essentially an underpainting. Okay, so that was pretty easy, wasn't it? I didn't even have to copy anything carefully. I just did a mid-tone. Yeah, get it all the way up to his shirt here. It's okay even if it goes over into his shirt collar a little bit. Same thing over here. It's okay if this goes onto her dress a little bit. Okay, that's done. Layered number one. No muss, no fuss. Okay, now number two. I want to do dark details. And I'm actually going to get darker in stages. I'm not going all the way to dark, dark. I'm going to begin with an intermediate dark, especially on the bride's face. And I'm going to introduce some very pale, but slightly darker than what's there, some very pale pink. Pink on the tongue. Pink under her nose. Pink on the bridge of her nose, side of her nose. Pink up here in her hairline, that's really important. You can't see it, but where her skin merges into hair, there's a zone, and definitely a pinker ear. Okay, she's already starting to look a little bit more alive than she did just a few minutes ago. And some of her musculature and bones here, sure. Bit of a shadow going toward her armpits. I'm going to paint on these shoulders. I'm just using the photograph. You know, I'm not using my imagination. I'm looking at the picture for areas of her skin that are slightly blush toned. I believe both of their hands, yes, both of their hands have a slight pink cast to them too. So you could ask yourself whether what I'm doing right now is just first layer, part two, or is it, in other words, is it mid-tone darkened, or is it really number two, dark details? I don't know. Hard to say. Okay, now to the man. Definitely pink in the ear. Pretty typical. Pink on part of his temple right here. Pink along his hairline. Pink on his neck. I wouldn't have expected that, but it is. and pink on his mustache. Again, would not have expect. That's what I'm going by. Bottom of his nose, slightly pink. More in his beard. Yeah. I hope you're feeling like, wow, that's easy. I could do that. Yep. I would like you to feel that way. You could do this. Okay, I'm done with that. Which maybe that was mid-tone take 2. But working my way toward layer 2, dark details. Now, let's start with her eyebrow. Her eyebrows here are dark, and these are dark. This is one case where I'm going to break my rule. Whoa! Bring out the sirens and the alarm bells. I am going to break a rule. The rule is you get dark with transparent colors and light with opaque colors. But every once in a while, I'm not sure when, I know it by looking at it, every once in a while, that rule will produce too much of a contrast. So I'm actually mixing up a medium dark brown, that has some white in it, so it's opaque or translucent actually. And I'm going to try to do this with one stroke. One stroke there, and one stroke here, and that's all. Same thing here. Just no muss, no fuss. And I'm gonna, actually, I had a few hairs that bled over. Okay, I'm gonna let that go at that for now. Let it go at that, and see if I like the effect later. I'm gonna zoom you guys in a little bit more so you can really see what I'm doing. Whoa. Okay, can you handle that? Forgive me while I give you a bit of a ride here. Okay. Same color. Mid-tone translucent brown. And her nostril, one stroke. I might have to, sadly, I might have to graduate to a really small brush for some of this. I'm using, compared to the size of detail I'm trying to do, it's a pretty large brush. Okay, I like what's happening. I don't know if you can see the, her eye at the moment is all one color, and that's not working very well. But that's all right, because I'm going to come back with a darker detail in a few minutes. Okay, so when I say 3 steps, mid-tone, dark details, light details, that doesn't mean doesn't mean you can't do 2 layers of mid-tone, which I did. Doesn't mean you can't do 2 layers of dark tone, which I'm going to do. Doesn't mean you can't do 3 or 4 layers of highlights. Are you understanding? So 3-step process for a face or any variegated texture. Mid-tone, maybe 2, 3 mid-tones. I've done 2 here. Then dark details, I'm about to do 2. And then light details, 1, 2, 3, 4. But it's the order is the important part. Piano lesson going on in the other room. I'm going to soften the edge of that. I think I'm going to interrupt my protocol here a little bit. So I'm mixing ultramarine blue and oxide red. Again, they're both transparent colors, so when you mix them together, you get a very dark, virtually black. And I'm going to come in here and do some of the details in her eye. This is an irritatingly small portrait, by the way, just in case you're wondering. Yes. Doing a portrait this small is irritating. Don't let anybody tell you different. Bigger than this is easier. And also darken a little bit of her eyebrow. And this eyebrow. Much better. And her nostril. So I've switched here to a smaller brush. Again, which I don't like to do. And you see the death grip I'm holding. But still trying to do these strokes. One stroke. No brushy, brushy, brushy. That's my name for the horrible default setting that too many people have when they paint. When they don't know what to do, they just turn their hand into brushy, 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 back and forth, because they're completely confused about what to do. So in their confusion, they say, well, I'll just scribble and see if something good happens. And it really does. It wouldn't hurt my feelings at all if every one of my students at some point in their history had taken a one-stroke toll painting, country painting, where you paint plaques, and it's called one stroke. It wouldn't hurt my feelings a bit. Most of my students would be helped. It helps you get away from the bad habit of brushy, brushy, brushy. Sorry about all the noise that's going on in the house here. But my house is not my own these days. I have four precious grandchildren living in the house with their parents. It's glorious, but it's noisy. So sorry about that. Okay, a little bit in her tongue. Let me zoom in real tight so you can see what I'm doing here. Whoa, hang on. There we go. Okay, so you definitely see about that. It's a bit of reflection on her eyelid there. There we go. So you can definitely see the details in dark. And then the last step will be details in oil. So hang on here. I'm going to try to get you pointed in the right direction. There we go. Okay? By the way, I don't know what it looks like on your screen, but when I look on my screen, it looks very washed out. The colors are horrible on my screen. I hope you're seeing something slightly better than that. Okay, I'm going to put this small brush away. I'm not going to clean it. I'm going to put it away and go back to a larger brush and begin. I really am now painting looking at the shapes in her hair. In the underpainting, I was pretty loose. I wasn't trying to copy too carefully. I was trying to get the overall shape, but I didn't do these sub shapes very accurately. But now I am. Every once in a while, you just have to use your finger. I wonder if I can get this to stick on the top. Yeah, there we go. I just picked up a little bit of my mid-tone dark brown, the stuff that I used on her eyebrows right at the beginning, for this part of her hair. Okay, I'm going to preach myself a sermon right here, and I want you to hear it. Our eyes have a built-in psychological telephoto lens. Let me turn this around because I want to explain this. Turn my camera around so you can see me a little bit better. You're not seeing a huge close-up of me. Okay. if you're a painter, this is art lesson time. Our eyes have a natural, built-in telephoto lens. I'll explain that in a minute. Our eyes also have, very similar to that, they have a natural, built-in, I'm looking for the right word, contrast enhancer. Okay, our eyes do you like this paint? Our eyes do two things. It's really our brain, of course. But our eyes do two things naturally all the time. Number one is they tend to zoom in psychologically to whatever we're looking at. Let me explain it very simply. In our field of vision, I've heard the number only like 2% or 4% of our field of vision is in focus. You know that, right? Everything else is blurry. So when you hold your eyes still, like an artist, which you do a lot, when you hold your eyes still and look at a thing, your whole being, so to speak, zooms into that thing, and your brain sort of enlarges it. In other words, that 2% area of your visual range that's in focus, you make it bigger. And you can see the advantages of this. I mean, if you're a hunter, my goodness, this is what helps you, catch the the mastodon or the poor little Bambi. But your eyes zoom in and create large. Now that's a real problem if you're an artist, because if you follow that instinct, everything you zoom in on, you're going to paint it too big. Okay? If you've done a portrait just off the cuff, you've probably had this problem. You start at one size, and as you progress, if you start with the left eye, then the right eye, first of all, you made the left eye too big, but you don't realize it until you move to the right eye, and you make that even bigger. Then you move to the nose, you make that too big, you make the mouth too big, you make the chin too big. In other words, everything tends to grow. Not the other way around. It doesn't tend to shrink. They tend to grow. So be aware of that. Now, number two is what I'm really fighting with right here. Not only do the things in our sniper. Yes, correct. Not only do things tend to get bigger, they also tend to get sharper. Now, all of this is happening in our brain. But our brains, when we focus in on that little area, we actually exaggerate or over-accentuate the contrast that's actually there. Again, it has to do with survival and seeing everything. That when we stare at something carefully like an artist, with our full intellect, when we stare at it, we exaggerate. Okay, so if you follow that with your instinct, you're also in trouble. And I'm preaching to myself here. So let me turn you around and explain that I have a real challenge in front of me here, because I have to be very careful not to over-accentuate the contrast in these faces. In other words, left to my own devices, I'll make the darks too dark, the lights too light, and the edges too sharp. Let me say that again. Left to my own devices, I will make the darks too dark, the lights too light, and the edges too sharp. Because that's what my brain does when I look at this photograph. Whew. And the reason I'm preaching myself that sermon is because I'm hoping that I don't do that today. Does that make sense? Okay, let me proceed with painting now. Man, it took me a long time to learn that hard lesson. It took me a long time to realize that that was a weakness in my portraiture, that I exaggerated the contrast, left, right, and center, all the time. I mean, almost all the time. So I have to say, okay, I see this contrast. I had better, even like this, I had better diminish it. So I just diminished it with a finger. By the way, I do paint with my fingers. That's the reason I don't use cobalt blues or cadmiums. I've talked about that a lot over the years, and I'm sure I'll talk about it again. But I don't use cobalts or cadmiums. If you wonder what I do use, go to YouTube, you're on YouTube, and do a search for Dan Nelson Not Limited Palette. The word not is important. Dan Nelson Not Limited Palette. And I walk you through my palette and why I use each color and why I don't have to use cobalts or cadmiums. Okay, that's subject for another day. I'm going to leave that there for right now. So yes, I do use my fingers, therefore I don't use the colors that cause cancer in California. I love saying that. Bad old joke. I keep saying the same old joke over and over and over. Good thing we don't live in California. Some of us. By the way, that's my 6-year-old son, Israel, practicing piano in there with his mother. Just in case you wondered. Love it, love it, love it. He comes from a long family of musicians. So of course, piano lessons are standard operating procedure. This isn't quite working, is it? Okay, I'm gonna have to hold it with one hand and paint with the other. Okay, so now remember, I'm saying to myself, remember this, remember your tendency to over exaggerate, to make things too large. But hopefully I've got all that nailed down because the drawing is complete. But to make things too sharp. For instance, the edge of her ear right here. In the photograph, dang, that's pretty sharp. Left to my own devices, I'll make it even sharper in the painting, which not only would be bad, it'd be really bad. Okay, because I actually want to soften it in the painting. I don't want the painting to be as sharp as a photograph. It won't look good. It will actually look more like a painting. It won't look like a photograph. It'll look like a painting of a photograph if I make these things too sharp. Now, of course, I've got one more layer to go on all this, so this is not the last word, so to speak. I'm going to do a very simple old trick. I have a brush that's called, I believe it's called a rake. It's very soft, and I'm just going to use it to basically blur out all of that stuff that I just did. Yep, I like that better. Good call, Dan. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Now, let's lighten this up a little bit. Again, I'm going to break my rule again. The rule being, you get darks with opaque and light with, you get, yeah, I can't say the rule. You get dark with transparent, light with opaque. That's the rule, okay? But here I am breaking the rule. Every rule could be broken. You just better know what it is. Otherwise, you're probably just screwing up. I know, I say that over and over and over again. I'm afraid if I came in here with a transparent dark, it would be, it's so hard to get as pale as I'm trying to get. So I'm just mollifying, yeah, I'm using the word mollify. I'm mollifying the impact of the dark by making it opaque, not too dark, in other words. By the way, I mentioned Drew Blair a little while ago. He has a brilliant terminology for this kind of thing. He calls it color buffer theory. And I think if you Google Drew, D-R-U, Drew Blair, he's the best airbrush painter in the world. And you key in the words, I haven't done this yet, I should see if it works. Key in the words color buffer theory. I think you'll find him teaching that somewhere. And it's related to what I'm just doing right here. Transparent dark would throw me too far in a dark direction. So I'm buffering how dark I can get by the exact color that I'm using. I don't know if that made any sense to you at all, but it sounded great coming out of my mouth. And now I'm mixing up again a medium dark, a little bit red. Hey, sweetie. Yes. Thanks for asking. Okay, same thing, different brush. Same thing, softening everything I just did. Softening over here by her mouth. Boy, I just made a horrible. I don't mind, but it doesn't. It looks so bad that I'm afraid it's going to disturb me. So I've got a paint pusher here, a soft rubber thing, just to scrape off her teeth, so that they're not so messed up. Makes sense? I'm scraping paint off her teeth with a little. Can you see this? With a little rubber, soft rubber point. It's called a paint pusher. I just used it to scrape wet paint off her teeth. Okay. Well, let's continue. Let's continue down. A little bit of hair here underneath her. A little bit more in her ear. A bit of dark right there under her chin. A little bit of softness over here. Okay, the pit right between her two, I'm forgetting, I think it's her trapezius. These, oh, no. What is it? These, forget it. I should have looked it up if I was going to try to talk about it. But very distinctive on a thin woman. Those tendons that come down and meet right there. Yes, it is very pronounced. Very pronounced clavicle, collarbone. And yet, again, if I left to my own devices, I'm going to make all of these edges a little too dark and a little too sharp. So after I paint them in like I'm doing right now, yes, I'm actually going to take that fuzzy brush and fuzz them all out again to try to help keep me from getting too contrasty. Hard lesson, heavily paid for. Paid for by screwing up, you know? Okay, I think we're good. I think I need to go to this smaller image. And yeah, ooh, inside her elbow. I wish I had a blow up of this right here, but I don't. So I'm gonna have to keep it pretty vague, which is maybe just as well. Distinct armpit shadow right there. And definite dark front of her arm. They were calling to say, what can we do? Yeah. So, a little more dark. Right here. If you need me desperately, that's where I am. Little dark on the top of her hand. Right there. Very dark space between her. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't see what I'm doing, can you? I'm sorry, I went down her arm and lost you. Okay. I think, will it stay there? Yeah. Okay, so very dark spot between her thumb and palm. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab my mop brush again. Reset, get things out of my hand. Pick up a clean rag. Make sure this mop is clean by rubbing it very vigorously, and then using it just to smooth out everything I just did. And just like that, it suddenly all gets a little bit better. A little more realistic looking even, because it's all soft now. Doesn't have so many hard edges. Yay. Okay. Let me continue now. I have to do under her other arm bit a little bit more of a crease here. And again, so the lines that I'm making right now are way too hard edged. And then the shadow of her shoulder reflecting his dark tucks. And just the inside of her arm right here, also in shadow. Okay, now let's see if when I rub that with the brush, there you go, here it is. Okay, let's see if I can make that work. Some of you maybe don't know what a mop is or what it's for. This is one of the uses of a mop. Fairly typical, I guess. Yeah, much better. But now that I've done that, I've lost the dark in here. So let me come back and do another layer of dark right here and just fade this one out with my brush. Yeah. Same thing over here under other armpit. A little bit of a secondary dark. I think that's good enough. When I come back and hit the highlights, I think that'll look good. So I'm done with her. Am I? Yeah, I think I am. Ready for the last layer, but I'm not going to make you watch me do all that. I'm going to hang up. This has been a long broadcast. Hope that's been instructive and helpful for you. And I'm going to do dark on him and then come back and do lights on both of them. Thanks so much for watching.